Coming back from a trip, I found my suitcases neatly lined up on the sidewalk. After 10 days visiting my sister in Colorado, all I wanted was to sink into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea. Instead, I found myself locked out of my own home. Rain clouds gathered overhead as I picked up the note tucked under the handle of my largest suitcase. The handwriting was unmistakable sharp, slanted letters that always seemed to be in a hurry. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Your dear daughter-in-law, Olivia. My hands trembled as I read the words again. I'd lived in this house for 32 years. Thomas and I had built it together when Michael was just a toddler. We'd planted every tree in the yard, selected every fixture, painted every wall with our own hands. After Thomas passed away from a heart attack 2 years ago, I'd agreed to sign the house over to Michael and Olivia legally. At least, I wasn't thinking clearly then. The grief had consumed me, along with some health problems that made everyday tasks seem overwhelming. It will take the burden of managing the property off your shoulders, Michael had said, his voice gentle but persuasive. You'll still live here. Of course, this will always be your home, Mom. Olivia had nodded in agreement, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. We just want to take care of you, she'd added. Looking back, I should have gotten that promise in writing. But who expects their own child to betray them? I fumbled for my phone and dialed the bank before the taxi even pulled away, needing confirmation of what I already knew. Yes, Mrs. Reed, we show your automatic payment of $2,100 went through last Friday as scheduled. The customer service representative confirmed. Thank you, I whispered, ending the call. A heavy drop of rain splashed on my forehead as I stood there, 65 years old, staring at my belongings on the sidewalk. The sky opened up then, as if giving me permission to break down. Too, I should have seen this coming. The sideways glances between Michael and Olivia whenever I mentioned redecorating my kitchen. The not-so-subtle comments about senior communities where I wouldn't have to worry about yard work. The way they'd rearranged the living room while I was visiting my sister last Christmas, moving my reading chair to the basement. Small things that weren't so small after all. The garage door was unlocked. Inside, a twin mattress had been placed against one wall with a small nightstand and lamp beside it. My clothes had been hung on a portable rack. My books, photos, and keepsakes were stacked in cardboard boxes labeled Eleanor's Things in Olivia's handwriting. I sank onto the mattress, feeling the concrete floors chill beneath my feet. Through the small window, I could see the house where I'd raised my son, buried my husband, and apparently lost my place in the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Mom, we need the space. Olivia has been asking for a home office for months. The garage apartment has everything you need. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult. As if I were the problem. I'd never been one to cry easily, but the tears came then, silent and hot against my cheeks. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up with Michael when he had nightmares as a child. The second job I'd taken as a tutor to pay for his college when Thomas's business hit a rough patch. The weekends I'd spent watching Sophie so Michael and Olivia could have couple time. And now I was reduced to a burden, an inconvenience to be tucked away in the garage. I didn't respond to Michael's text. Instead, I called Patricia, my oldest friend. Eleanor, what's wrong? She asked immediately, sensing the catch in my voice. I need a place to stay, I managed to say, the words sticking in my throat like shards of glass. They've put me in the garage. Patty didn't ask for explanations. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said, as I waited, sitting on that thin mattress surrounded by the boxed-up remnants of my life. I made a decision. This house had been my heart for 32 years. I'd poured everything into it, my love, my savings, my dreams, and now they thought they could simply push me aside. The garage door rattled as the rain intensified outside. I looked at my trembling hands and slowly curled them into fists. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just Michael's mother or Thomas's widow. I was Eleanor Reed, and I was done being invisible. Patty's spare bedroom wasn't much, but at least it had a door that locked and windows that let in actual sunlight. After 3 days at the Sunset Motel, a name that felt eerily appropriate for this chapter of my life, I was grateful to be somewhere that didn't charge by the night. "You can stay as long as you need," Patty insisted, setting a mug of coffee in front of me. "Jim and I rattle around in this house like two peas in a barrel since the kids moved out." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "I appreciate it, but this can't be permanent. I need to figure out what to do about the house." "You mean your house," Patty corrected, her eyes narrowing. "The one you're still paying for." Patty had been my friend for over 30 years. She'd known Thomas, had watched Michael grow up, had been there through the good times and bad. And unlike my own son, she remembered who I was before I became invisible. "I keep thinking about when it all started to change," I said, staring into my coffee. "After Thomas died, I was so lost. The depression, the panic attacks, not being able to sleep in our bed for months. And they took advantage," Patty finished. The memories surfaced like bruises I'd been avoiding pressing on. 6 months after the funeral, Olivia had started rearranging the house, claiming it needed updating. My suggestions were dismissed. My belongings migrated to closets, then to the basement, then to storage bins. You know what Olivia said when I objected to her throwing out Thomas's fishing gear? "We need to move forward, not live in a museum." As if my husband's memory was just clutter to be cleared away. Patty reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What about Michael? Surely he stood up for you." I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. "Michael said I was being difficult, that I needed to adapt to the new normal." His new normal apparently meant forgetting his father and sidelining his mother. The control had been so gradual, I barely noticed it happening. First, they took over the kitchen, criticizing my cooking. Then came complaints about my TV shows being too loud, my friends visiting too often, my gardening taking up too much of their yard. Each surrender on my part only emboldened them further. "The worst part is, I enabled it all," I admitted. "I kept paying the mortgage because I was afraid they'd struggle financially. I wanted to help them, to be useful, to be—" My voice trailed off. "To be loved," Patty said softly. The truth of her words stung. I'd been buying my place in that house in my own son's life, one mortgage payment at a time. "Eleanor, there's something you should know." Patty hesitated. "I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would hurt, but you deserve the truth." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Last month at book club, Olivia was there. She'd had a few glasses of wine and started talking about their plans. They're putting the house on the market. Eleanor, they want to buy that new construction in Oakwood Hills." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "They're selling my house. They think it's their house," Patty said gently. "And technically, legally, it is. But morally, that's another story." I thought of the 32 years of memories embedded in those walls. Thomas and I bringing baby Michael home, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, the garden Thomas had built for our 20th anniversary, my husband's last breaths in our bedroom, surrounded by the life we'd created together. And they were going to sell it all to strangers without a second thought. "There's more," Patty said, her expression grim. "Sarah from the bank is in our book club, too. She mentioned that Michael took out a second mortgage on the house 6 months ago. A big one." "What?" This was news to me. But why would they need that much money? Olivia's been trying to climb the ladder at her real estate firm. Apparently, having a showcase home for networking events is part of her strategy. And Michael's been under pressure at work. There were rumors of layoffs at his firm. I think they're in over their heads financially. The pieces were starting to fit together. The urgent need to sell the house, the sudden eviction to the garage, the desperation in Michael's text message. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. Patty's eyes hardened with resolve. "First, you're going to stop paying their mortgage. Let's see how quickly their plans change when the bank starts calling." "But what about my credit?" "Second," she continued. "You're going to talk to my nephew, Jason. He's a lawyer who specializes in elder rights. There has to be some legal recourse here." "I'm not elderly," I protested weakly. Patty arched an eyebrow. "You're old enough to be treated with respect, which is not what's happening here." She was right. For 2 years, I'd been shrinking myself, becoming smaller and quieter to avoid being a burden. And where had it gotten me evicted from my own home? My belongings packed in boxes, my existence reduced to an inconvenience. As the reality of my situation crystallized, something else emerged from beneath the hurt and betrayal, a slow burning anger that felt almost foreign after years of accommodation. "Okay," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Let's talk to Jason." Patty squeezed my hand. "That's my girl. And Eleanor, remember who you are. You're not just Michael's mother or Thomas's widow. You're Eleanor Reed. And it's about time everyone remembered that." For the first time since finding my suitcases on the sidewalk, I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope, or maybe it was determination. Either way, I wasn't going down without a fight. Jason, Patty's nephew, was not what I expected. With his jeans and Henley shirt, he looked more like a college professor than a lawyer, but his eyes were sharp as he reviewed the mortgage statements I'd brought. "So, you've been making payments on a house that's no longer in your name," he said, frowning. "And your son and daughter-in-law have been living there rent-free while planning to sell it." Put so bluntly, it sounded absurd even to me. "Yes, and they evicted you to the garage." I nodded, embarrassment flushing my cheeks. How had I allowed things to reach this point? "You have options," Jason said. "The financial arrangements could constitute a verbal contract. At minimum, you could sue for recovery of the mortgage payments you've made since the property transfer." "But that could take years," I said, remembering how long it had taken a friend to settle her divorce proceedings. Jason nodded grimly. "Legal battles are rarely quick, especially when family is involved. You're looking at months, at least, possibly longer, and there's no guarantee of the outcome." "What about the second mortgage Michael took out?" I asked. Jason made a note. "That complicates things. If he's leveraged the property significantly, it could affect any potential settlement." Patty, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. "She needs to confront them first. Make them understand what they've done." Jason looked skeptical, but I knew Patty was right. Before taking legal action against my own son, I needed to give him one last chance to make things right. That's how I found myself standing on the porch of my own home the next day, my heart pounding as I rang the doorbell. I'd lived in this house since before Michael was born, yet here I was, a visitor requiring permission to enter. Olivia answered, her surprise quickly masked with a tight smile. "Eleanor, we weren't expecting you." "I need to speak with you and Michael," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Of course, come in." The living room had changed again since I'd left. My antique lamp was gone, replaced by a modern floor lamp I didn't recognize. The family photos I'd arranged on the mantel had been rearranged, with several of Thomas now missing. Michael emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I came to talk about the house, I said. Patty told me you're planning to sell it. Their exchanged glance confirmed everything. We were going to tell you, Michael said, not quite meeting my eyes. Once everything was finalized. Finalized, I echoed. This was my home for 32 years. Your father and I built this house. We raised you here. Olivia sighed dramatically. Eleanor, we understand you have sentimental attachments, but we need to do what's best for our family now. Your family, I repeated. And what am I? An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Mom, Michael finally said, his tone patronizing. You signed the house over to us. We appreciate everything you've done, but it's our property now. We get to decide what happens to it. I took a deep breath. I've been paying the mortgage for the past 2 years. Every month, $200, $100 from my account to keep a roof over your heads. Another glance between them. They'd known. That was your choice? Olivia said coolly. We never asked you to do that. My hands began to tremble. I did it to help you, because that's what family does. And we're grateful, Michael said, though his tone suggested anything but. But that doesn't change the legal situation. The house is ours. So, my 32 years here, my financial support, my role in this family, none of that matters. Michael shrugged, looking uncomfortable but unmoved. Mom, you're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. We can help you find a nice senior apartment. I don't need a nice senior apartment, I snapped. I need my son to show an ounce of decency and respect. Olivia stepped forward, her smile tight. Eleanor, I think you're getting emotional. Perhaps we should continue this conversation another time. That's when I knew, truly knew, that there was no fixing this. The son I'd raised, the boy I'd loved with every fiber of my being, was gone. In his place stood a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obligation, a problem to be managed. I've stopped the automatic mortgage payments, I said quietly. Michael's expression changed instantly. You what? If you want to sell my home, you'll need to pay for it yourselves. You can't do that. Olivia's voice rose. What about our credit? We have plans. Yes, I said. I hear Oakwood Hills is lovely this time of year. Michael's face darkened. Mom, the house was Dad's gift to me. You know that. The implied message was clear. It was never really yours. The words hit me like a physical blow. 32 years of my life dismissed in an instant. I see, I said, my voice barely audible. Well, then I suppose there's nothing left to discuss. I turned to leave, my legs unsteady beneath me. As I reached the door, I paused, looking back at the son who no longer saw me. Your father would be ashamed of you, Michael. And for the first time, so am I. I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. The spring air felt cool against my hot cheeks as I made my way down the driveway, away from the home that had never truly been mine. Something had broken inside me today, but something else, something stronger, had been forged in its place. The next step was finding work. At 65, with no recent employment history beyond volunteer work at the library, I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I'd been a teacher for 30 years before retiring to care for Thomas during his illness. Surely those skills were still valuable. They weren't, according to the 7 places that rejected my application over the next 2 weeks. Too old, too long out of the workforce, too overqualified for entry-level positions, but lacking the current experience for anything else. I was sitting in Sunshine Cafe after my latest rejection, nursing a cup of coffee I could barely afford, when the owner approached my table. Mrs. Reed, she said, I'm Diane Cooper. You probably don't remember me, but you were my 3rd grade teacher, class of '88. I studied her face, and suddenly the connection clicked. Diane Marshall. Of course I remember. You wrote that wonderful poem about the ocean that won the county prize. Her smile widened. You remember that? Wow. That meant so much to me back then. She hesitated. I couldn't help overhearing. Are you looking for work? An hour later, I had a job part-time to start, mainly handling the register during morning rush and helping with the books. The pay wasn't much, but it was something. A beginning. You did what? Patty asked, her coffee mug suspended halfway to her lips when I told her the news about confronting Michael and finding a job. I stopped the payments, I repeated, still shocked by my own boldness. I told them if they want to sell the house, they'll need to pay for it themselves. Patty set her mug down with a definitive thunk. Well, it's about time. Jason, who had insisted on joining us after my confrontation, looked less enthusiastic. It's a good first step, but we need to protect you legally. If your name isn't on the title anymore, you could be liable for the missed payments without any claim to the property. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving room for doubt to creep in. Have I made a terrible mistake? I asked. No, Patty said firmly. You finally stood up for yourself. Jason tapped his pen against his legal pad. Let's be strategic about this. I'm going to contact the bank tomorrow, explain the situation, and see what options we have. In the meantime, you need to gather every shred of evidence that shows you've been making these payments. I nodded, thinking of the meticulous financial records Thomas had taught me to keep. At least I had that. What about my things still at the house? I asked. Patty squared her shoulders. I'll go with you to collect them. If they give us any trouble, I still remember how to swing the softball bat from our community league days. Despite everything, I found myself laughing. Patty had always been fiercely protective, even back in high school when she'd confronted the girls who'd made fun of my second-hand clothes. I don't know what I'd do without you both, I said, my voice catching. Jason reached over and squeezed my hand. You're not alone in this, Mrs. Reed. We'll make sure they don't take advantage of you anymore. The next morning, a call came from First Federal Bank. I answered with trepidation, expecting questions about the missed mortgage payment. Mrs. Reed, this is Alan Phillips from the mortgage department. We've received a request to discuss the situation with your property on Maple Avenue. I gripped the phone tighter. Yes, that's correct. I understand you've been making payments on a property that's no longer in your name. Our records show consistent payments from your account for the past 24 months. Yes, I confirmed, but I've decided to stop those payments. There was a pause. Mrs. Reed, I don't normally do this, but would you be willing to come into the branch to discuss this further? I think there might be options you haven't considered. 2 hours later, I sat across from Alan, a kind-faced man about my son's age, as he explained something called an equitable lien. Essentially, by consistently paying the mortgage on a property from which you derive no benefit, you may have established an interest in the property even without being on the title. He explained. Hope fluttered in my chest. What does that mean exactly? It means you could potentially place a lien on the property for the amount you've contributed. They wouldn't be able to sell without addressing that lien. For the first time since finding my suitcases on the sidewalk, I felt a glimmer of control returning. There's something else, Alan said, lowering his voice slightly. We've noticed some concerning patterns with this account. Your son took out a substantial second mortgage 6 months ago, and there have been several late payments on that loan already. I wasn't surprised. Michael had always relied on others to handle the practical aspects of life. First Thomas and me, now Olivia. And apparently my monthly payments. On top of that, we've received inquiries from credit card companies. Alan continued. It appears there may be significant unsecured debt associated with the property owners. The picture was becoming clearer. Michael and Olivia weren't just being callous, they were desperate. They'd overextended themselves financially and needed to sell the house quickly to cover their mounting debts. "What did you tell him when he called about the missed payment?" I asked. "That missed payments affect credit scores and could eventually lead to foreclosure proceedings," Alan said. "He didn't take it well." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Mom, we need to talk about the mortgage ASAP." I showed Alan the message. "What would you like to do, Mrs. Reed?" he asked. It was such a simple question, but no one had asked me that in years. What did I want? Not just regarding the house, but with my life. I thought of the confrontation with Michael and Olivia, their casual dismissal of my contributions, their assumption that I would continue to finance their dreams while being relegated to the garage. "I want what's rightfully mine," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Alan nodded, respect evident in his expression. "Then let's make that happen." That afternoon, armed with information from Alan and legal advice from Jason, I waited for Michael's inevitable visit. I knew he wouldn't call first. He'd want to catch me off guard, use the element of surprise to gain the upper hand. Sure enough, he showed up at Diane's cafe just as my shift was ending. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "Can we talk?" Diane caught my eye from behind the counter. "Take your time. Eleanor, I'll cover the register." I nodded and led Michael to a corner booth away from my regular customers, who had become something like friends over the past few weeks. "You look different," he said, studying me. I smoothed down my apron. "I am different." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, about the house." "I'm not discussing that here," I interrupted. "If that's why you came, you're wasting your time." "Please," he said, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. "Olivia and we're in trouble. The bank called about a lien, and our credit score is dropping because of the missed payments." I observed my son, his expensive watch, his carefully styled hair, the subtle scent of cologne that probably cost more than I made in a day at Sunshine Cafe. Everything about him screamed entitlement and comfort, a life cushioned by others' sacrifices. But there were new lines around his eyes, a tightness to his mouth that spoke of stress. For the first time, I looked past my hurt to see that Michael was drowning. "What do you want from me, Michael?" He leaned forward. "We need you to lift the lien and resume the payments, just until we can sell the house." The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. "And what do I get in return?" "We'll make sure you're taken care of," he said, as if offering a great kindness. "There's a really nice senior community in Westbrook." "Stop," I said, raising my hand. "I'm not interested in being taken care of. I've been taking care of myself and you for years." "Mom, be reasonable. You can't keep working here." He gestured around the cafe dismissively. "You're 65. "And I'm doing just fine," I said. "How are you doing? Michael, I hear you took out a second mortgage, and there are rumors about credit card debt. How much are you and Olivia overextended?" His face paled. "How did you? It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're trying to solve your financial problems by selling my home out from under me." Michael's expression hardened slightly, his mask of contrition slipping. "Fine. What do you want? A percentage of the sale?" I studied him, this stranger wearing my son's face. "I want my home back." He blinked, then laughed nervously. "That's not possible. We've already made an offer on the house in Oakwood Hills." "Not my problem." Michael's expression darkened. "It is your problem if you want a relationship with your granddaughter with any of us." The threat hung in the air between us, ugly and explicit. My own son was using my love for his daughter as leverage. "Are you threatening to keep Sophie from me?" He had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but pressed on. I'm just saying that families need to support each other. Olivia and I have a plan for our future, and you're standing in the way. The way I stood in the way when I paid your college tuition, or when I watched Sophie every weekend so you and Olivia could have couple of time, or when I signed over the house and kept making payments so you could save for that boat you bought last summer. Michael flushed. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's not. My shift was over. I slid out of the booth and stood, straightening my apron. I need to go now. Mom, please. Michael's voice cracked slightly. We need this. The house in Oakwood Hills is perfect. We can't lose it. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my lap with scraped knees, looking to me to make everything better, but that boy was gone. In his place sat a man who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. Yet, I couldn't quite extinguish the spark of maternal love that still flickered beneath my anger. He was in trouble, trouble of his own making. Yes, but trouble nonetheless. I'll think about it, I said finally. But I need something in writing from you and Olivia first. Meet me at Jason Wallace's office tomorrow at 2 p.m. Relief washed over Michael's face. Thank you, Mom. You won't regret this. As he left, I wondered if I already did. The next day, I arrived at Jason's office early, my stomach in knots. I'd barely slept, going over and over the decision I'd reached in the middle of the night. Jason reviewed my proposal, his eyebrows rising slightly. Are you sure about this? It's more generous than they deserve. I'm sure, I said. It's not about what they deserve. It's about what I can live with. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. All right then, let's get the paperwork ready. Michael and Olivia arrived precisely at 2, both dressed as if for a business meeting. Olivia's smile was tight but triumphant as they took seats across from Jason's desk. Thank you for coming. Jason began formally. Mrs. Reed has considered your request regarding the property on Maple Avenue. We appreciate that, Olivia interjected smoothly. We're certain we can reach an agreement that benefits everyone. Jason slid a document across the desk. This is what Mrs. Reed proposes. Michael picked it up, scanning the contents. His expression shifted from hopeful to confused to angry in seconds. What is this? He demanded. That, I said calmly, is my condition for lifting the lien. I will buy the house back from you for the current market value, minus what I've contributed over the past 2 years. You'll have enough to pay off your second mortgage and credit card debt, with something left over to secure a rental that's within your actual means. Olivia snatched the paper from Michael's hands. This is ridiculous. The house is worth far more than that to us, especially with the Oakwood Hills deal. A deal you can't afford, I pointed out. How much are you carrying in credit card debt? Olivia, 50,000 more. Her shocked expression told me I'd hit close to the mark. You can't do this, Michael said, his voice shaking. The house is legally ours. With a lien against it, Jason pointed out, which significantly complicates any potential sale. We'll fight this, Olivia said, her voice cold. We'll get our own lawyer. I nodded, having expected this reaction. You can try. But the legal proceedings will take time, months, maybe years. Your credit scores will continue to suffer, and that dream house in Oakwood Hills will go to someone else. The truth of this sank in visibly. Michael and Olivia had overextended themselves, counting on a quick sale of my house to finance their upgrade. You planned this all along, Michael accused, his voice barely above a whisper. From the moment we moved you to the garage? No, I said quietly. I just finally stopped allowing myself to be used. Olivia stood abruptly. We need to discuss this privately. As they stepped out, Jason gave me an approving nod. You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Reed. I wasn't so sure. The look of betrayal in Michael's eyes haunted me. Had I become as calculating and cold as they were while we waited? Jason explained how the agreement would work. I would take out a new mortgage a possibility despite my age, due to my excellent credit history and the equity in the home to buy back the house. The payment would be enough to clear Michael and Olivia's debts and give them a fresh start, albeit a more modest one than they'd planned. The door opened. Michael and Olivia returned, faces grim but resigned. "We'll accept your offer," Michael said stiffly. "But I hope you realize what this means for our relationship." I met my son's gaze steadily. "I do, and I hope someday you'll realize what it meant when you put my suitcases on the sidewalk." The first night back in my house, I couldn't sleep. I wandered from room to room, touching familiar walls, tracing the door frame where we'd marked Michael's height each year, standing in the kitchen where Thomas and I had danced on our 30th anniversary. It had been 2 months since the confrontation in Jason's office. 2 months of legal paperwork, of tense exchanges with Michael and Olivia as they reluctantly moved out, of rebuilding my life piece by piece. The house felt both familiar and strange. Olivia had repainted several rooms in trendy grays and whites, removing the warm yellows and blues Thomas and I had chosen. The kitchen had been remodeled with sleek, impersonal appliances. But underneath the cosmetic changes, the bones of the home remained the squeaky third step on the staircase, the way sunlight filtered through the bay window in the afternoons, the slight tilt to the floor in the upstairs hallway that Thomas could never quite fix. I stood in the master bedroom, now empty of furniture except for the bed I'd brought from Patty's spare room, this room where Thomas and I had shared our lives, where he had taken his last breath, felt sacred somehow. "I'm home," I whispered, as if he might hear me. The silence that answered wasn't lonely, just peaceful. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. The doorbell rang the next morning as I was unpacking my modest collection of dishes. I opened it to find Patty holding a pot of soup and a bottle of wine. "Housewarming," she announced, marching past me into the kitchen. "Though I suppose it's technically a homecoming." I laughed, following her. "It feels like both, honestly." Patty set her offerings on the counter and turned to survey the kitchen. "Good Lord, what did that woman do to your beautiful oak cabinets?" "Painted them gray and replaced all the handles with something called brushed nickel," I said. "Apparently oak is passé." Patty snorted. "You know what's passé? Throwing your mother-in-law out on the street?" We both laughed, though the hurt beneath the humor was still raw. "Have you heard from them?" Patty asked as she helped me unpack. I shook my head. "Not since the closing. Michael made it clear that I'd chosen the house over them." "That's not what happened, and you know it," Patty said firmly. "You chose self-respect. There's a difference." I wasn't sure Michael would ever see it that way, but I had made peace with my decision. The alternative, continuing to let them use me while treating me like an afterthought, was no longer acceptable. "Well," Patty said, opening the wine, "to new beginnings." We clinked glasses, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this woman who had stood by me when my own family hadn't. The following weeks brought a steady rhythm to my days. Mornings at Sunshine Cafe, afternoons spent slowly restoring the house to something that felt like mine again. I didn't have the money to replace all of Olivia's modern updates, but I could add touches that brought back the warmth, colorful throw pillows. Family photos returned to the mantel. Thomas's fishing gear hung proudly in the den. I also began attending a support group for seniors at the community center oyster. Initially, I went just to fill the lonely evening hours, but I found unexpected comfort in sharing my story with others who understood loss and reinvention. Many of them had similar experiences, adult children who saw them as burdens, the struggle to maintain independence, the challenge of building a new life when society expected you to quietly fade away. You're an inspiration, Mary, a 72-year-old widow, told me after one meeting. Most people would have given up. I nearly did, I admitted. But you didn't, she said, squeezing my hand. That's what matters. Through the group, I rediscovered my passion for painting, something I'd set aside decades ago when motherhood and career demanded all my time. Every Thursday evening, a few of us would gather in the center's art room, our canvases propped on easels, classical music playing softly in the background. You've got real talent, the instructor said, studying my watercolor of the garden Thomas had planted. You should consider showing your work. I laughed at the idea, but it planted a seed. Perhaps there were still new beginnings to be found. Even at 65, work at the cafe brought its own rewards. I'd never expected to enjoy waitressing at my age, but there was something deeply satisfying about the simple human connections, remembering Mr. Peterson's preference for extra cream, chatting with the young mothers who came in after school drop-off, watching Diane build a business with heart and determination. You're my good luck charm, Diane told me one afternoon. Sales are up 15% since you started. It's your new blueberry muffin recipe, I countered. She grinned. Maybe, but you've brought something special here. Eleanor, people feel it. The only shadow over my new life was the absence of Sophie. I missed my granddaughter fiercely, her gap-toothed smile, the way she'd crawl into my lap for stories, her endless questions about everything under the sun. Michael had made good on his implied threat. There had been no visits, no calls, not even a message asking how I was doing. Each passing month without her was a small heartbreak. I kept a drawer of gifts books I knew she'd love, a hand-knit sweater for the coming winter, small treasures I thought might delight her, waiting for a reunion I wasn't sure would ever come. You could take legal action, Jason suggested when I mentioned it during one of our now regular coffee meetups. Grandparents have rights too, but something held me back. Fighting in court would only deepen the rift, turn Sophie into a pawn in an adult game she couldn't understand. No, if reconciliation came, it needed to come naturally, not through legal coercion. I'll wait, I told him. She knows where to find me. As summer turned to fall, I found myself settled into my reclaimed life. The house was mine again, not just legally, but in spirit. I'd repainted the living room in a warm butterscotch that reminded me of the original color Thomas and I had chosen. The garden was thriving once more, cleared of Olivia's pretentious ornamental grasses and replanted with the perennials Thomas had loved. On a crisp October Saturday, Patty, Jason, Diane, and a few friends from the senior center gathered in my backyard for an impromptu barbecue. Jim, Patty's husband, manned the grill while the rest of us sat in lawn chairs, sharing stories and laughter as the afternoon sun gilded everything in soft gold. Looking around at these people who had become my chosen family, I felt a profound sense of peace. They had seen me at my lowest, broken, homeless, questioning my worth, and they had helped me rebuild, not just my life, but my sense of self. A toast, Patty declared, raising her glass. To Eleanor Reed, who reminds us all that it's never too late to reclaim your life. Everyone clinked glasses, smiling warmly at me. The moment was perfect, bittersweet only in the absence of the two people I still missed most, Thomas, who would never return, and Michael, who had chosen to walk away. Later, as twilight settled and my guests helped clear away the remnants of our feast, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone else, and for a moment, an old fear flickered. Was it someone coming to take something else from me, I opened the door to find Michael standing there, looking uncertain and older somehow, a sleeping Sophie cradled in his arms. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Can we come in?" My heart stuttered in my chest. "Of course," I said, stepping back to let them enter. Michael carried Sophie to the couch, gently laying her down. She stirred briefly, murmuring something in her sleep, then settled again. 7 months since I'd seen her, and she'd grown so much. Her dark hair was longer, her face a little less round. The sight of her made my throat tight with emotion. "She fell asleep in the car," Michael explained, his voice low. "She was so excited to see her grandma. She barely slept last night." The words "her grandma" sent a wave of relief through me. He hadn't poisoned Sophie against me. Then, "It's good to see you," I said, not knowing what else to say after all this time. "Both of you." Michael nodded, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking around the living room. "You changed it back," he observed, noticing the warm colors that had replaced Olivia's sterile palette. "Not completely, just enough to make it feel like home again." An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered finally. "We just finished a barbecue. There's plenty of food left if you're hungry." "Coffee would be good," he said, following me to the kitchen. As I busied myself with the coffee maker, I noticed he was thinner, the confident set of his shoulders somewhat diminished. His wedding ring was missing. "Olivia and I separated," he said, catching my glance. 3 months ago?" I tried to keep my expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that." He let out a hollow laugh. "Are you really? I'm sorry you're hurting," I clarified. "No matter what happened between us, I never wanted that for you." The coffee maker gurgled into silence. I poured 2 cups, sliding one across the counter to Michael. For a moment, we were both transported back to countless mornings at this same counter, Michael rushing to school, me making sure he ate something before dashing out the door. "I've been seeing a financial counselor," he said abruptly, "and a therapist. Trying to understand how things got so messed up." I waited, letting him continue at his own pace. "The counselor asked me to track where my money was actually going." He stared into his coffee. "Turned out, Olivia had been spending far more than we could afford designer clothes, expensive vacations she'd take with her girlfriends, renovations to impress her real estate clients. When I confronted her, she said appearances were crucial to her success." "And the debt?" I asked gently. "Almost 70,000 in credit cards alone," he admitted. "Plus the second mortgage. We were drowning, and I couldn't admit it. To you, to myself, to anyone." He took a shaky breath. "The therapist has been helping me see patterns, how I've always avoided difficult realities, how I let Olivia take control because it was easier than standing up to her. How I—" He hesitated. "How I treated you the same way Dad used to protect me from consequences." The parallel struck me with painful clarity. Thomas had always shielded Michael from the results of his actions, paying off the fender he dented as a teen, making excuses when he missed family obligations, covering his share of the rent when he forgot during college. I had enabled the pattern after Thomas died, continuing to protect Michael from adulthood's harsher demands. "The garage," Michael said, his voice thick with shame. "That was Olivia's idea, but I went along with it. I told myself it was temporary, just until we sold the house and got back on our feet. I convinced myself you'd be fine, that you even needed the simplicity." He looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I was wrong, so wrong. And I've been trying to find the courage to tell you that for months." I felt the hard shell around my heart begin to crack. This wasn't the entitled, dismissive son who had put my belongings on the sidewalk. This was my Michael, finding his way back to himself and to me. What about Sophie? I asked, glancing toward the living room. She's with me most of the time now, he said. Olivia's focus is on rebuilding her career. She takes her on weekends sometimes. He hesitated. Sophie's been asking about you. A lot. She doesn't understand why we stopped visiting Grandma. Another silence fell, this one less strained than before. Olivia's pregnant, he said finally. The baby's due in January. Oh, the news landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of complication through the tentative reconnection. It's part of why I needed to come today. Michael continued, with the baby coming, I've been thinking about family, about what kind of father I want to be. He met my eyes directly. I don't want my children growing up seeing me treat you the way I did. I don't want them thinking that's how we treat the people we love. And is that what this visit is? I asked carefully. Love. It's an apology, he said. A beginning, I hope. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. But I'd like the chance to try. Before I could respond, a small voice called from the living room, Daddy. Michael smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. In here, sweetheart, with Grandma. There was a pattering of feet, and then Sophie appeared in the doorway. Hair mussed from sleep, eyes widening when she saw me. Grandma, she squealed, launching herself into my arms with such force that I nearly dropped my coffee. I held her tight, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her small body against mine. Hello, my darling, I whispered. I've missed you so much. I missed you too. Daddy said you were on a long trip, but now you're back in your house again. She pulled back to look at my face. Are you going to go away again? I glanced at Michael, who had the grace to look ashamed at the lie he'd told his daughter. No, sweetheart, I said, smoothing her hair. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. Good, she beamed. Can I see my room? Is it still purple? Daddy said you might have colored pictures for me. It's still purple, I assured her, though in truth, Olivia had painted it gray like everything else. I'd repainted it myself, hoping that someday Sophie might return to it. And I have lots of pictures for you. Shall we go look? As Sophie tugged me toward the stairs, chattering nonstop about school and her new pet hamster, I caught Michael's eye. There was regret there, and uncertainty, but also something that might have been hope. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet. The hurt was still too raw, the trust too broken for that. But it was a beginning, a chance to rebuild what had been shattered, not the same as before, but perhaps, in time, something just as valuable. Later that evening, after Sophie had exhausted herself exploring the house and rediscovering forgotten toys, after Michael had promised to bring her back next weekend, after they had driven away with plans to return, I sat on the porch swing in the gathering dusk. The autumn air carried a hint of wood smoke and fallen leaves. In the distance, a neighbor's wind chime sang a gentle melody. I wrapped myself in one of Thomas's old sweaters, still hanging in our closet after all this time. I thought of him then, of the life we'd built, of the son we'd raised, who had lost his way but might be finding it again. I thought of the woman I'd become in these past months, stronger, more determined, unwilling to be diminished for anyone's convenience. The house behind me wasn't just walls and a roof. It was a testament to survival, to resilience, to the quiet, unstoppable power of a woman who had finally learned to put herself first. I was home, not just in this house, but in my own life, and for the first time in years, that life stretched before me, full of possibilities that were entirely my own. The path to healing with Michael would be long and uncertain. The wounds between us wouldn't mend overnight. But as I sat in the deepening twilight, Watching the first stars appear in the clear autumn sky, I felt something that had been missing for far too long. Hope, not the desperate hope of someone waiting to be rescued, but the steady, resilient hope of a woman who had rescued herself and in doing so had perhaps rescued her family too. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my own bed in my own home. I would go to work at the cafe, paint in the afternoon, perhaps call Patty to share the news of Michael's visit. Simple things, ordinary things, yet infinitely precious now that I understood their true value. The porch swing creaked gently as I rocked, a familiar sound that had underscored countless evenings across the decades. Thomas and I planning our future. Michael learning to ride a bike in the driveway, Sophie taking her first wobbly steps across the lawn. And now, this moment quiet, solitary, but far from lonely. We did okay, Thomas, I whispered to the stars. And I'm going to be okay too. The night wrapped around me like a promise, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that it was true. I was going to be more than okay. I was going to be magnificent. Thank you for joining Eleanor Reed on her remarkable journey from heartbreak to healing, from betrayal to brave new beginnings. Her story reminds us that it's never too late to stand up for ourselves, to reclaim our dignity, and to rebuild our lives on our own terms. Perhaps you've recognized elements of Eleanor's struggle in your own life or in the lives of those you love. The quiet erosion of respect, the gradual dismissal of one's worth, the painful realization that those closest to us sometimes see us as an inconvenience rather than as the complex, valuable humans we are. But like Eleanor, we all have the capacity to forge new connections, rediscover forgotten passions, and create families of choice who see us clearly and love us fully. We can learn that true home isn't just a physical space, but a feeling of belonging to ourselves first. If Eleanor's story touched you, please share it with someone who might need to hear its powerful message. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful chapter of our lives begins after we've found the courage to turn the page. Until our next story, may you always know your worth and find your way home.